Welcome to episode 72 of Rubbish Talk with myself, Alasdair.
And myself, Jane Bond.
And this week we're continuing our journey through the waste hierarchy. We're going to look all about recycling. But before we do that, I think there's going to be a few rants this week, Jane, because I had my usual walk along the beach this morning to work, and the place is a bomb site because it was such a nice weekend there.
Well, I had bin wars on our local Facebook page.
Bin wars in Eaglesham.
Bin wars in Eaglesham. Do you know what? I normally don't do Facebook responded, but this one was just, there was this picture, right, of two bins provided by the council outside the shops in Eaglesham. And on the top were all these plastic bottles and bits of rubbish all put on the top of the bins. And the caption on this from this guy was, "Why can't the council provide us with better bins or bigger bins?" And I was just like, no.
Why can't the member public walk 50 yards to the empty bin that's probably down the street? Or take it home with them?
Well, exactly. So I put a comment on there about, taking responsibility for your own waste. It's not the council's waste, it's your waste, blah, blah, blah. And everybody agreed with me. Even the guy came back to argue with me, he couldn't, to be honest. So I felt that I've won. I won bin wars.
And you never win. Going in social media, Jane. You never win. I stole your picture and put it up on the Rubbish Talk TikTok account, and it's now sitting at 41.9 thousand views.
Blimey.
There's a few comments on that about, the council should do better, etc., etc., etc. But there's quite a few saying, yes, people should take their stuff home and take responsibility.
Right, okay, well that's all right then. Okay, so I feel vindicated slightly.
Anyway, that wasn't the official rant. We do have a rant for the end of this episode, but that's an unofficial one. So what have we got news-wise, Jane?
Well,
Jane.
Well, Scottish Government came out with a report about waste reprocessing infrastructure in Scotland. So it's August 2025, so it's only just come out. And it sets out how 15 key material streams are currently managed in Scotland and what the plan is. So I've not read it,
Jane, you're not doing your homework again.
I've not read it, but it's talking about plastic, aluminium, steel, paper, card, etc., etc. So, it'll be interesting to see what the Scottish Government have come up with this time.
Well, I have read most of it, and I did actually put a social media post up today, because what makes clear is that although some material types are actually recycled in Scotland, as in food waste and such like, a lot of the material is not actually recycled in Scotland. It is bulked up and sent for recycling elsewhere. So I think I've been banging this drum for quite a while, that we need to get the recycling figures, and we need to split it into material that is prepared for recycling and material that is actually recycled. And that would show where the gaps are in terms of the infrastructure, and hopefully create a few opportunities for people because one of the things from the report was there's quite a lot of, in terms of jobs created, economic value to the recycling sector, all that sort of stuff. It's all good for Scotland PLC. We just need to get a bit better at supporting it. So I do know there's been quite a few comments on LinkedIn that some of the information has not been that great. So it looks like it's been very much a desk-based study, and there's maybe people in the sector, particularly people in specific areas, that have much better information than's gone into the report. Watch this space, I think,
Yeah, it does say about Scottish ministers must have regard to the desirability of the economy being one in which waste is managed in Scotland, where it is appropriate to do so. And really, like you say, we don't really manage our waste in Scotland, do we? We just give it to everybody else to sort it for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is not a sustainable option at all.
And then more depressing news. Suez, one of the big recycling companies down south, they've put out a paper or an article saying that violence and abuse towards waste workers is up 42%. And I think if you talk to any waste operator or any local authority where there's an interaction between waste workers and the public, quite often these staff are, threatened or abused in some sort of way. And that goes back to, as I've talked in the podcast before, I'm involved with an organisation called Switch, which is to promote health and safety training and education in the waste sector in Scotland. And we actually did a video that was put together. We'll put this link up in the show notes if anyone's interested in sharing it with their staff, just to try and get that point across about, violence against staff's totally unacceptable, whatever environment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, I mean, a lot of the staff aren't paid that much. They're not paid to take that abuse from,
Yeah.
you know, from people about where they can't work out where to put their recycling or whatever. No, it's not hard.
That's what I've really struggled all the time I've been in the waste industry. I've really struggled with people's attitude about waste. It's as if they're just, it's as if they're burning in the back of their car and they're just desperate to get shot of it. It's probably been sitting in their house for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And it wasn't burning a hole in their house then, but all of a sudden, on a busy bank holiday, they decide to want rid of it and it's got to get out of the car because they need to get to the golf course or whatever it is. And, it's a strange attitude we have to waste.
Yeah. You know, it's like, well, it's not mine, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not my waste. But I do have something about Kingussie High School. You know, they're going down the reuse and probably prevent first two on our hierarchy using reusable lunch containers.
Maybe they were listening to episode 68 or 69, Jane, where we talked about reduce and reuse. You never know. And you set the challenge of a reusable packed lunch or a no waste packed lunch.
Well, they were saying that single-use packaging accounts for about 9% of the rubbish generated. So they must have done a little bit of a waste composition analysis. So when they're starting in September, and so they're looking at snacks such as sandwiches, toasty and burgers as being, available in a reusable lunch container, which I think is that's a good start, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So hopefully.
But less cheery news from our former guest, Bryce Cunningham, who was on episode 61. So Bryce was Mosquito Dairy, if you remember. If you've not listened to that episode, it was a really good episode about sustainability farming and milk and so on. But unfortunately, he lost the contract with East Ayrshire Council where he'd been supplying milk to East Ayrshire Council schools. It lost it to Muller. But what he'd done as part of that contract with the schools was it was organic milk from local herd, and he was supplying it in bulk, so he'd cut down the amount of waste that's produced and so on. And by the sounds of it, he only lost about a couple of thousand a year. And his query is whether the full sustainability benefits of his contract have been totally taken into account. And this is a bit where the tie-up between government bodies, so Zero Waste Scotland pushing circular economy, 100%, 200 staff involved, £84 million budget, pushing that. And then you've got public procurement where they're issuing a contract to a multinational who at the moment are struggling to provide organic milk to Pret a Manger. So if they can't keep that contract going, how likely are they going to keep the East Ayrshire Council school contract going? And are they supplying it locally, or are they bringing it in from all across the country? How sustainable is their service? So I'm sure Bryce is disappointed, but I did say to him that he's probably going to get 5 years worth of social media out of this, because I'm sure Muller may not comply exactly with the terms of the contract in terms of providing organic milk to the children in East Ayrshire.
And he's saying it's not just about the savings, it's about the cost, recycling costs, jobs lost, local milk values. So, keeping things local as well as everything else. Which,
absolutely.
Yeah, that is a shame.
If nothing else, give Mosquito a follow for the lovely pictures of cows and calves, because they keep the cows and calves together, and they regularly post the most lovely pictures of cows and calves out in the pasture land. So
they did.
If nothing else, give them a wee follow for that alone.
And did you know that cows have no teeth?
Did we? Yeah, we learned that. We learned that. Yes.
And on to other sort of four-legged friends. There's something in here about a litter-picking obsessed dog helps clean up coast. So it's a black Labrador, and he's gorgeous. He looks gorgeous, and he's taken to helping clear the sea of plastics. So he's been trained by his owners to collect bottles, drinks, cans, and other pieces of waste around Plymouth. So I'm kind of dead impressed with this dog. If he can do it, why can't everybody else do it or take it with them in the first place?
Well, the old Albion Cocker Spaniel Charlie had the ability to sniff out a tennis ball any place he went. You could go any place, and every single walk he would find an old tennis ball. It was absolutely amazing. You wouldn't believe how many tennis balls must be lying about in the countryside. Because he would find that one tennis ball. So it's not unusual.
Oh, bless.
So that's our news for today, I think, Jane.
Yeah. And just have a shout out to Little Logie, which is what the dog's called.
Oh, is that what his actual name is?
Well, it's called Logie, but they've called him Little
They've called him
Logie.
Little. Oh, right. Okay.
And he's got an Instagram page and everything. So
There we go. I'm sure we could get Mia to share the Instagram page for Little
Logie.
Logie. There we go.
Do you think we can get him as a guest?
That'd be a great episode. I mean, you, Jane, talking to the dog, I think. So this week we're going to continue our journey through the waste hierarchy, and we're going to talk all about recycling. So if you missed our first two episodes, we had episode 68 and 69, where we looked at reducing the waste we produced and then reusing it. If you've not had a listen to these, give them a little listen. So whenever you talk about waste management to people, they always home in recycling as if recycling is the best thing ever. The reality is not producing the waste in the first place or reusing something is actually even better. So it's trying to get people to think above the recycle message. So we're going to have a bit of a deep dive into recycling, Jane.
Yeah, so we are. So we're going to say recycling, like you say, it's the third one down on the hierarchy. But what can be recycled? Come on, Alasdair, I'm going to ask the dumb questions.
Oh, dear.
Can we, we put all of this stuff in our recycling bins. Can it all be recycled is the question.
Well, I was at a party at the weekend, and I ended up getting in conversation with a young lady talking about, she works in a large office in Edinburgh, and she says there are constantly arguments in their office about what should and shouldn't go in the recycling bins. And clearly some of the things that some people thought were recyclable were just nonsense. They were buying a ready meal from the supermarket, they were eating a ready meal and then putting the food contaminated plastic into the recycling and thinking that was acceptable. So I think there's a big awareness piece out here about what can and can't go into the recycling. And it's as complicated as we'll come on to talk about. So basically anything we produce can in theory be recycled. So in theory you can recycle crisp bags, but can you recycle them in an economically viable way? As in, can you collect them so you've got enough to actually recycle? Can you then make them into a recycled product? And can you do it cheaper than the cost of a virgin material? And that's the bit that most people forget about when they actually talk about recycling. So what we actually recycling in the UK is actually a relatively small number of waste streams. And if you don't fit into that waste stream, then it's actually really hard to. So the classic is the coffee cup. A coffee cup's cardboard with a plastic liner. Unless you get that coffee cup to the recycling point, that can't be recycled. So it's not down to whether sometimes it can be recycled. Most things can be recycled, but it's whether you've got collection infrastructure to get it to where it needs to be treated.
And a lot of the time as well, recycling, if it's done properly and you get a good quality recycler out of the end of it, is all worth money. I mean, people don't do it just because it's a nice to do. They also do it because it's financial. It's regulation-wise that we separate our recycling, but it's also people have got to make money out of it.
Well, the big driver that sits out there for recycling in the UK is the landfill tax. So you get landfill tax £126 a tonne, and landfill or incineration, as we'll talk in future episodes, roughly sits about £150, £160 a tonne. So if you can recycle for less than that and get value for your material, then that starts making it valuable. So quite often what you'll end up with is what I would call high value recycling. So if you have glass bottles, you take clear glass bottles and you recycle them and make new glass bottles. That's
having washed them out first.
Well, the rinse them out, but in that recycling process they'll be washed out, so that's fine. So you can go from sort of high value material to high value material. If you take paper and cardboard, for example, you take that paper and card and you turn it back into paper and card, so that's high value. If you take, for example, plastic recycling, there's so many different types of plastic, and it's so difficult to get a pure stream of plastic. Quite often what happens is you end up making a high-value product, which is your plastic bottle, into a low-value product like a plastic fence post or a plastic picnic table, because you can't get the purity you need to make it into plastic bottles again. And you just need to look at the UK market at the moment. The UK market is most of there's only, I think, one major plastic recycling plant still operational. There's been 2 or 3 shut down in the last couple of weeks, and that's because the financial viability is not there. It's not that they've not got the material. It's the viability of actually making that plastic into a new product and generating revenue from is not working for them.
It's the separation, isn't it? Because if you look at costs, you look at high density polyethylene milk bottles, milk cartons, for instance. If you actually look at if you had a bale of high density polyethylene milk bottles, you can command quite a high price. But it depends on the market. It depends on the fact that plastic bottles come from oil. What's the fluctuation in the oil prices? For the raw virgin product. And also in terms of a lot of plastics now, they're looking at you have to have at least 30% recycled plastics. So again, there's a market there, but it's just getting that clean, pure product, or
it's getting that single
single waste stream
plastic out. So if you could collect up every single the hard plastic tops of a bottle. If you could collect these up around the country, that's a really good, pure plastic waste stream. But the practicality of doing that, and if you think of most bottles have a plastic cap, they've got a bottle, and they've got a label that's plastic. So effectively, you've got 3 types of plastic there. Plus, you've probably got a bit of glue gluing it together. So it's challenging. So one of the big things is market, and things like aggregates. There's quite a network in the UK now of what they call soil wash plants, where if you've got some aggregate, you'd wash it, you'd produce sand, gravel, stone and so on. Now they produce good product, but they've got to now compete with the quarrying industry. And quite a lot of engineers would rather get stuff from a quarry rather than use recycled content. So it's building up that market and building up that confidence that, this recycled aggregate is just as good as the crushed stone you're getting from the local quarry. And again, the price comes into play that, you'll not sell the recycled aggregate for twice the price. You need to be the same as the virgin material.
Yeah.
So it's way more complicated than people think. And I think particularly some of the other materials, your plastics, your papers, your metals and so on, the recycling market ends up competing with the worldwide market for virgin resources.
Yeah.
So you'll never sell a ton of recycled paper for more than a ton of virgin paper, and that's where it gets a little bit messed up.
But the thing with paper, though, it depends on the length of the fibres. So the good paper's got long fibres. As you recycle it, the fibres get shorter and shorter, and you end up with lower quality paper, such as toilet paper. But like I say, you can never have too much toilet paper, as we found out in COVID.
As we discovered during COVID.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, that's paper and cardboard is probably one of these ones where naturally, because of the recycling, where the paper fibre length gets smaller and smaller, you are probably going from high quality recycling to lower grade recycling, but that's just the reality of paper. But other materials, your metals, your plastics and so on, can in theory go from high quality to high quality. But the reality is we've got to try and separate it out. And one of the issues we've got in terms of recycling in the UK is the household waste collection, the recycle that's collected by the councils, that's about 20% contaminated at the moment. So before the recycler does anything, they've got to remove that 20%. So we're almost doing the work with our hands tied behind our backs, because the segregation going on with the public is that poor.
And I think I was asked the other day, it was like, well, what's the point in washing all your containers out? And I'm like, well, there's a number of reasons. You wash your containers out. You don't want last night's, kind of takeaway, Chinese takeaway. Not only because it's all manky and horrible, you're taking it away, you're taking it into a recycling centre, so flies and all sorts, but also it kind of clumps together, so you can't actually separate it properly. And then it just goes down into the, throwing away bit and going into landfill or energy from waste just because you haven't bothered to rinse it out or,
Yeah.
scrape out last night's takeaway actually into your food waste bin.
If you use your food waste bin.
Oh,
Well, that's another that could almost be a rant, but we'll not go there today. We'll not go there today. But no, if you think about it, most collections, if you have a weekly collection and you're not cleaning out your recycle, it's sitting in your bin for a week. It's then going to a reprocessing facility. It's probably sitting there in a pile for a week. Before you know it, you've got maggots there, you've got flies there, and you've got an environmental problem. That waste operators will get grief from the public because they've got a fly problem. The fly problem's not been created by them, it's been created by the people not segregating the waste properly. So it's
a big circle, isn't it?
absolutely.
And do you know what I do, right? Because somebody said to me, oh, I can't be bothered to do that. And I'm like, well, I just chuck my plastics and stuff in my dishwasher along with everything else because it doesn't matter. They don't have to be in a nice contained thing. All you just need to do is just chuck them on top of everything else and they come out nice and clean.
I don't go quite that far, but I do rinse them out. But in saying that, you do, just as some of them do. Yeah, some are easier to rinse out than others. But the other one that's there at the moment is, so in terms of contamination with recycling, sometimes it's deliberate. We know from doing waste audits and so on, Jane, that the things you get in recycling, it's ridiculous. You get nappies, you get dog poo, you get all sorts of stuff that just shouldn't be there. But you also get what we call wish cycling. We get people who've not actually gone on to the council website. They've not actually read what can and can't go in their various bins. And probably the easiest way of explaining it is but particularly plastic seems to be the one that everybody has an issue. And this normal rule of thumb is if it's hard plastic, as in you can't squash it down, it should usually be able to go into your recycling bin. If it's soft plastic, then it won't be able to go into your recycling bin, but you can take that to your supermarket for recycling because they bulk it up and send it back. So the lorries bringing the food to the supermarket take back the empty packaging from the store, including the packaging that people have sort of hand delivered to the front entrance.
Yeah, I mean, that's like your plastic bags and your kind of film and
Your
stuff
films
like
and so on.
that. So all your pots and your tubs and things, trays and stuff, you can wash those out and chuck them in your recycling. But again, it's like your film. Because some people think, oh, well, it's plastic, I'll chuck it in my recycling.
Yeah.
And then that gets into a problem, doesn't it, when you get to the recycling centre, because then it can't be separated properly.
Well, the problem the recycling centres have got is that they're already dealing with this 20% contamination. So a fifth is contamination. They're having to try and find that and separate it before they even start separating out the metal in cans and all that sort of stuff. And in films and stuff, what that tends to do is wrap around some of the packaging and disguises it. So basically you end up with they end up with a less clean product that doesn't meet the specs that the actual recyclers are looking for.
Because one of the things somebody said to me as well is, oh, we do recycling at work and we put our stuff in a plastic bag and then it gets dumped in with all the other waste. And I'm like, well, yeah, but the thing that happens there is it does get taken to a recycling facility and then they do take out the plastic bag that you've actually put in your recycling. So it's not that it all gets taken away to the same place and it all gets dumped. It is worth, the recycling is separated. And I think that's an important thing because people have this myth that, then the council just dump it all in one container and off it goes. And what was the point in me doing that recycling?
Yeah. But I suppose that's the point, I think, that at household level, if you want to know what can and can't go to the bins, you go to your council website and you check that. In your office environment, you probably need to look at, so certainly in Scotland, everybody's got a requirement to segregate the plastic, metals, food waste if you do catering, whatever. And that's also come out in England and Wales. If you don't know how your waste operators separating that in terms of bins and stuff, that's what you need to know. Unless you know how they're operating in terms of how their facility works, you can't sort out your segregation in the office properly.
We were talking to somebody about aluminium cans and how very recyclable aluminium cans are, and the fact that to recycle an aluminium can saves 95% of energy
Of what
as
cost to
opposed
produce.
as opposed to getting it out of the ore, because getting it out of the ore, the aluminium ore, it just takes so much energy to do that it's so much better for the environment and everything else to recycle your aluminium cans.
But did you know that most aluminium cans have actually a very thin plastic liner inside them?
Really?
Yep.
No, I didn't know that.
There you go. Learn something new every day, Jane.
Well,
So they're maybe not quite as good as they make out. And you do see that now. You do see, instead of previously to have glass bottles or plastic bottles of water, you do see a few aluminium cans of water nowadays. I've noticed that creeping in
I've seen that as well,
various
actually.
places. So one of the things I'm always banging on about in this space is the disconnect between what the producer put in the market. We talked about this last episode about the Aldi doing a plastic wine bottle. They automatically assume everything can be recycled. The reality is it can only be recycled if there's the infrastructure and the collection and all the rest to actually physically do it. It's easy for them to say, yeah, this is a plastic bottle that can be recycled, but is there actually the system to support it? There's then what the householder or the office worker, what instructions they get and what they can and can't put in the bins. And then there's the reality of what the actual waste reprocessors can actually achieve. And quite often they're only looking for some fairly basic waste streams, and everything else they're viewing as either contamination or non-target material.
So can I ask you a question then, in terms of my recycling? So my pizza box, right? We were talking about this earlier.
Dear.
I had a pizza box, right? And, I love my pizza. Had the pizza box, it's all scabby and food contaminated on the bottom. And I'm thinking, right, okay, I don't want to put it into my recycling because, it's just going to get contaminated and everything like that, but I feel awkward putting it into my residual bin because it really shouldn't go in there. So I had a bit of a dilemma, to be honest.
Well, some pizza places will give you a small liner under your pizza.
Well, yes, this one didn't actually.
There we go. So if it does that, and that's part of the reason, but then normally if you got the liner, then your pizza box could go in the recycling bin. What I would do with that, Jane, is I would tear out the contaminated bit, and that would go in either my residual bin, or if I home compost at home, it could go in the home compost bin. And I would put the rest of the cardboard in the bin.
Well, you see,
I'm forever tearing up.
I should have thought about that, really, shouldn't
You
I?
should have, really.
To be fair, I should have thought about that.
I'm forever tearing. It's a bit like if you get a cake box or something with a plastic window, I'll tear out the plastic film so it's only the cardboard going in the cardboard bin. Or if the cardboard box has got slightly contaminated, I'll tear it up and put one bit. Half the time I've got to take it out of the residual bin. Alison's put it in the residual bin first, and I've seen it and thought that shouldn't be in there. So
yeah, my son Lewis, he does his recycling, but instead of like taking the plastic film off, and then washing the container and then putting it in the recycling, he puts a whole lot in. So I have to keep taking it out with the film and the food.
I think
residue.
I think the bit that I think we need to try and get across to the public is, if you make it really, really, really hard for the waste industry, they're going to have to charge you lots and lots of money for doing this. Whereas if you make it as simple as possible by washing out, getting it clean, getting the film away, etc., you can make it a bit easier, and the companies can make a better product, generate more cash, and then in effect they would be charging the councils less.
I think that's the thing. People have got it into their head that it's not their waste; it's the council's waste.
Yeah.
So I pay my council tax, therefore they need to get rid of it, and I just, it's very short-sighted.
There's so many rants at the moment with England going on to the simpler recycling. There's so many rants at the moment. We're only getting our bin done every second week or third week. I'm like, you're not getting your bin done every second or third week. You're still getting it done weekly. You're just getting a recycling bin instead of a residual bin.
Yeah.
We've got to sort it all. And why don't you? You've got to take responsibility for the waste you produce. And I think that bit's not pushed enough by government. Government needs to push that a bit more to say you need to take responsibility for your waste.
So when we're talking about recycling, are we including here our food waste, Alasdair, or is that separate? Because I've had lots of discussions recently with people about food waste. And like we've said before, only 20% of people who have food waste bins actually do their food waste recycling. But every time I get, there's maggots, I get maggots, I've had maggots. I'm not doing it again. I've had maggots. I don't know what I'm doing right or wrong, but I've never had maggots.
I've never had it. You know who has maggots? The people that have maggots are the people that have never segregated their food waste because they have maggots in the bin. You never get maggots.
I've never had maggots.
Very, very occasionally you'll get wee fruit flies. If you've got some waste or rotten food in there, you'll get wee fruit flies. You've got to remember food waste collections weekly. So at the very least, you're always going to have, well, you're slightly different because so there's two, so in answer to your question, so if you compost food waste, that would be probably classified as recycling. If you put food waste in an anaerobic digestion plant, that would be recovery. And that's what we're going to cover next week's episode. We're going to cover recovery. So technically taking food waste and garden waste and composting, that would be classified as recycling. But no, I don't buy this. The people that complain about smell and maggots and all the rest are the people that are not segregating their food waste.
Everybody seems to have had maggots. And I'm like, how can everybody have had maggots? I've never had maggots.
Never had a maggot in my life.
I've never had a maggot either. So what are the stats for recycling then? How are we doing in Scotland compared to everywhere else?
So the recent ones that were published by UK government were pretty depressing for the UK, actually. So this is the 2023 data. Don't start me on another rant while we're halfway through 2025 and we're reporting 2023 data, but that's probably another story for another day. So recycling rates in England are 44%, in Northern Ireland is 50.2%, in Scotland is 42.1%, and Wales is 57%. So Scotland is actually the poor relation in all this.
So we're actually at the bottom.
We've probably got the most comprehensive household waste recycling system in the country. And that, to me, that is down to the fact we've never actually engaged with the public to get them to use the damn thing properly.
That is shocking as well. I mean, the difference between Scotland and Wales, when we're both, population is probably quite similar, even if Wales is a lot more compact. And
we will. As we've been promising for a while, we've managed to get Andy Rees, who heads up all the waste management and recycling Wales. We've got him coming on a future episode in a couple of weeks' time. So we'll find out. We'll find out why Wales is ahead of us all. So come on, Scotland, pull your socks up. We might have Zero Waste Scotland bragging about how sustainable we are and circular communities and all that sort of stuff. But in reality, in terms of the old recycling chart, we're not doing particularly well.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's just the people not engaging?
It's back to what we've talked about before. We've got a food waste recycling system that 80% of the population don't use.
Because of the maggots, obviously.
But because they've got maggots.
There's no maggots. There's no maggots.
But you know what? We could have a maggot farm, Jane. There's good value in maggots.
Well, do you know what? One of the girls.
That's maybe a future episode.
Yeah. One of the girls on one of my courses was talking about she had a wormery. And I was like, oh, good for you. Good old wormery.
Well, Laura, less waste Laura, she talked about the wormery she had in her flat.
She did.
She had a wormery in her flat. And again, she was worried about maggots.
I think that's probably slightly a step too far. We can't expect everybody to have a wormery.
No, we can't.
At least we can expect them to use their food waste bins.
Yeah, very least you use your food waste bin, and at the very least, if you're not sure about the recycling, check the council website. It's really clear. It's really easy what you can and can't put in bins. And I suppose I think I talked about this in a previous episode. I was over at the in-laws and they sort of admitted they weren't really doing much recycling because they didn't have space in the kitchen. And I was like, put a wee bin at the back door for all your plastic bottles, and then once a week you can take them out to the bin. It's a bit about getting set up that you've got that facility. At my house, I've got my food waste bin under the sink, and I've got two separate boxes, one for paper and cardboard, and one for my plastics and my metals. And then my glass bottles go at the door, and when I go out the back door, I take my glass bottles with me. And it's nice and easy and simple.
Yeah, I think it's like you say, it's just getting set up, isn't it?
Yeah,
so come on, Scotland, let's get it. Let's see if we can at least equal England or even below England.
That's quite depressing to think that, England's not... Well, not one, that England's beating us, but two, that England doesn't even have a segregated food waste collection.
No.
Food waste is 30% of residual waste at the moment. And they've not even got that in place. So it just shows how badly we're doing. But anyway, that's maybe a depressing point to end our wee deep dive into recycling. But it probably leads on to my rant of the week. Does it?
Okay, go on then. What was your rant of the week?
So rant of the week was I spotted, and this is maybe slightly political rather than waste orientated. So Zero Waste Scotland are looking for a circular economy behaviour change analyst. And they were paying them the salary band is between 52,000 and almost 56,000.
Wow.
I know for a fact, if you go to a local authority, that sort of salary band would be for a manager looking after a depot, probably with 4 or 5 supervisors reporting to them, and probably with 100, 150, 200 staff reporting to them. So someplace in this we're getting this slightly mixed up. I'm not saying that the circular economy behaviour change analysis is not an important job, but maybe we need to actually be supporting the people that are front line. I know who will be getting the most rest and not having lots of phone calls and hassle and
hassle
grief
from the public as well.
Yes.
Abuse like the guys from Suez.
So they'll be getting grief from the public, they'll be getting grief from staff, they'll have lots of health and safety issues to deal with, they'll have lots of complaints to deal with, they'll have lots of just management things to do, and then there's somebody, equally being paid by government.
What is
a circular economy
change,
I think,
whatever analyst? What are you doing?
I think it was a social media post. Mia's sitting in the background here. Mia, don't get ideas.
So you're looking at behavioural change analyst, right? Okay, yeah.
No.
No idea what that means. Obviously, it's not a job for me because I don't know what it is. Don't know what it means.
So that was my rant, and I think it's probably it's not aimed particularly at Zero Waste Scotland. I think it's more a general point that we seem to be a little bit out of sync. There's people doing really important, practical frontline jobs. And then there are people doing, jobs.
Go on, say
it. I'm struggling with the words here, how to phrase this. In terms of income, I've always thought you need to think about what impact your job's going to have. And I would like to think the manager of the council goes home at night, and although he's had a lot of grief, his team have collected, thousands or hundreds of thousands of bins that particular day without any issues. How you measure the impact of a circular economy behaviour change analysis, I'm not quite sure. Is that
that was
very correct?
Yeah, that was very good, very good. You chose your words carefully there, Alasdair.
We would love to hear people's feedback on all the topics we've discussed. So
yes,
there you go.
And if you've got a weird and wonderful job title, then we'd like to hear from you as well.
Let us know. No, that's us done for this week. Thank you for listening. We'll see you again at 4:00 next week. We do have a bit of a confession. Last week's episode never actually went out at 4:00. We'll not say why. We just had a little bit of a technical hitch. But next week we're going to cover the waste hierarchy, and we'll talk all about recovery. We'll talk about AD, like we alluded to earlier, but we'll also talk about waste energy, and I'm sure in this we'll probably talk a little bit about the landfill ban as well, because that's quite important. So if you like what you're hearing, or you don't like what you're hearing, you don't agree with us, give us a like, give us a comment, give us a share on social media.
And
the TikTok account.
I was going to say particularly go on the TikTok account for my bins.
If you want to get depressed, go on the TikTok account for some of the comments that get put up. But yeah, we're making progress in TikTok. But I suppose what's important with the TikTok is we're actually, part of what we're trying to do with this was actually work out where the problems are. And I think the problems is there's a real lack of understanding about how, waste management works and why things are important, which hopefully we're doing a little bit to address. And if you want to contact us in a conventional way, just drop us a note at hello@rubbishtalk.co.uk.
Yeah, look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Bye.